Dr. Marianne Brandon.
Dr. Abraham Morgentaler.
It's another episode of The Sex Doctors. Here we are. So, good topic today.
Yeah.
Yeah. About the impact of porn, early viewing of porn on the brains of young people.
Right.
Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah.
Where should we start? Well, I think that what is important for people to recognize is that...
Before we start, a small disclaimer. The Sex Doctors podcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice.
The average age that young people first experience porn is age 12.
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And parents all tend to misrepresent.
That's the average age, which means half are seeing it even earlier than that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And parents tend to sort of think, well, their kid hasn't been exposed to it, which is generally not the case.
They have no way of knowing.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
They have no way. It happens a lot at school.
Right.
And even research shows that it happens. I saw something that kids see porn more in religious schools than they do in public schools. I told you that, didn't I?
Yeah.
That was like, you're kidding me.
Yeah. But I believe it. I mean, it's the more something is forbidden, the more people go after it.
Well, that's right, because that's this case with states. The states that are more conservative watch more porn.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the concern is that somehow being exposed to, for young, well, let's call them children. That's what they are, children and adolescents. To be exposed to porn may impact what sex is like for them, their experience of sex, their expectations of sex well into the future as adults.
Exactly. And, we now have solid research showing that choking is super popular on college campuses these days. So 1/3 of women were choked in their last sexual experience.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there and repeat it, okay? 1/3 of women in their last sexual experience at college, right?
Yeah.
Were choked by their partners, presumably male partners.
Correct.
And why does that happen, Dr. Brandon?
So that's the thing. So we can this is a phenomenon we've never seen.
When I was in college, as far as I know, I never heard of anybody choking anybody. Right. I never heard of anybody being choked. And there was plenty of sex going on and people talked about it.
Right, exactly.
So this is new.
This is new.
And where do you think it's coming from?
Well, so that's the thing. This is the first kind of crop of college students that was reared on porn from a young age. They've had tech in their life their entire lives. And so this new phenomenon has to be the result of what they've learned from porn. Now, I don't care what people do in their bedrooms, but first of all, the college kids often add alcohol and drugs to their sex. So that can create some very dangerous situations here. They're often having sex with people they don't know well, can also create dangerous situations with choking and doing that sort of thing. Yeah. Plus, they're not learning that there are other ways of having sex too.
Yeah.
Like lovemaking. So there's just problems.
Well, the question in my mind is, where does this idea come from? It's not natural, right? You don't hear about primitive tribes, right? Before the advent of technology, that this is some critical part of their mating rituals.
No, you don't.
And I have to say that over the years, it seems to me that of course I would only look at porn for professional reasons to understand what society is doing. Right. But it seems to me that there have been different times over the years when different kinds of practices became like the big thing, right? And I think that the influence is that porn has always been looking for something more, the next thing, right? The thing that's even more exciting. They want views and clicks, and that's how they make money, right? Has to be even more out there. And so I would wonder whether porn isn't responsible for that choking story.
Well, that's what I wonder too. And, that coupled with the fact that parents are always underestimating how often their kids are accessing porn, how young they are when they access porn. This just really needs to be discussed, because the problem, it's not like inherently we have some moral or ethical problem with porn, us,
right.
You and I, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't. However, It's a very different thing for a child who's never had any kind of romantic relationship or sexual relationship to see porn than it was for like us when we were adults. We were exposed to internet, porn.
Right.
So we already knew what all this was all about, but the kids don't. And this is what they think is
Right.
is sex. And it's a part of sex, but it's not all of sex. So that's
Right.
one of the problems.
Right. And I think that you and I would agree that, there's nothing wrong with trying different things, right?
Right.
And play acting and all these different ideas. But the idea that it becomes so prevalent and it's not an obvious things that happens, certainly with previous generations or with the act of lovemaking. And really, I think what it underscores is that um, young people are learning about sex. They're being trained based on stuff they see that isn't a normal part of human sexuality or relationships.
Right. It's sexual theater, but they don't know that.
Right. Yeah.
Even if you were to say it to them, they still may not believe it because what they see with their own eyes is sexual theater. So they're seeing people do that. So they assume that's why.
And if they start being sexual, let's say in college, and it gets reinforced by what's happening with their new partners,
Right.
then they say, well, this is the way it is.
Right. Now, people are having less sex. We're heading not in a great direction with all of this in general as a culture.
Yeah.
But another.
Yeah, we feel bad. We feel bad for societies having less sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mean to make light of that. They are.
Right. So people are spending less time together. They're having less sex. But another issue with porn is that there is a phenomenon where people's early experiences sexually, where they get aroused, can get sort of imprinted in their minds. And that's kind of what they need to really get off, to have an orgasm or you
Yeah.
really get excited.
Yeah.
So our brains get sort of trained in what is exciting to us based on like the environment. It's not all hormones and genetics. It's also
No.
the environment.
Yeah, and early sexual experiences have a huge impact on people.
Right.
Often like for the next 50 to 70 years, right? Like some people get this idea, it's like their first, I mean, it's well known, first sexual experience or very impactful and then affects them forever. That's what they think about when they have sex,
Right.
as they think of in order to have an orgasm.
And it doesn't even have to be pleasurable. If their first sexual experience was was a big deal, like an adrenaline experience, even negative, it still gets imprinted as what they need to get excited. So like I've worked with people who've been sexually abused at a
Right.
young age. They need to replay that in some way in order to get excited as an adult.
Yeah.
As much as they hate that. Now this isn't the case for everyone who's been sexually abused.
Right.
So nobody
Yeah.
needs to think that. But this imprinting happens for reasons of pleasure, but also reasons of extreme discomfort.
Yeah. And it may not be politically correct to even point that out, but it is reality. I mean, that's just what happens. So I have what I think is a highly relevant study. Now it's in rats, not humans.
Which is because you can't you can't do a randomized controlled trial on kids in porn, right?
Well, yeah, yeah. You can do a lot with research animals you just couldn't do with people.
Exactly.
So this is an amazing article. It's written by this brilliant guy named Jim Faus. Last name is spelled Pfaus.
He is brilliant.
And he's done so much really interesting work around sexuality, really looking at it, using animal research, especially rats, as the way the way into this. And he was at Concordia University in Montreal. I don't know that he's there anymore.
He's in Bangkok.
Yeah, he's moved around a little bit. So this article is called "Who, What, Where, When, and Maybe Even Why: How the Experience of Sexual Reward Connects Sexual Desire, Preference, and Performance." Now, there's a lot in here, but basically what they do, we'll just hit on the high points, is that they take male rats and some female rats too. They have different experiments. And they basically give them exposure to the opposite sex. And having that sex acts like a reward system for them. So whatever it is that they experience with those early experiences essentially trains them. So for example, um, I'll just read from the abstract. In both male and female rats, early sexual experience with partners scented with a neutral or even noxious odor induces a preference for scented partners in subsequent choice tests. That means the male rat, let's say, has sex with a female for the first time, but they've applied to the female an unpleasant odor. They end up having sex because that's what males and female rats do when they're put together in these cages. And that unpleasant odor then in the future makes him choose females that have that unpleasant odor.
Isn't that something? This is one of my favorite articles, frankly, of all time, because there was a time I thought this was hilariously funny.
Well, it is funny, but it's also like impactful. Now, we have to say humans aren't animals, but you know what? Our deep centers of our brains that are involved with sexuality is part of the deep brain, and the biological mechanisms are conserved by and large, which means as we evolve different species, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of what's true in some of these, let's call them lower mammals, or mammals that have smaller brains, is true in mammals with bigger brains like us too. There's another one, same kind of setup, but they have the female rats put on they don't put it on themselves. They have a little jacket.
Yeah.
They get their arms through this thing, and it looks a little bit like a life preserver.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't impede how they move around the cage or whatever, but they've got a jacket.
Yeah.
And that's what the males are exposed to. They have sex with those females with the jackets, and forevermore, it appears, they like females wearing jackets.
To the point that they will sometimes not have sex, even if it's really like time for them to have sex, they'll avoid sex.
A female's not wearing the
She
jacket.
doesn't have her jacket.
She's not a sexual object.
No.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah, it's astounding. So, and what's interesting, like maybe this is a little bit too nerdy for for the audience or the subject, is that it happens. It seems to happen through an opioid type reward system. So if they give an opioid blocker, that preference disappears. So there's something about it that works through that mechanism. And then the conclusion is that there's a critical period during an individual's early sexual experience. Individual in this case is a rat, not a human, but you can generalize if you want and speculate that it applies to humans too. Critical period exists during an individual's early sexual experience that creates a love map or a gestalt of features, movements, feelings, and interpersonal interactions that are associated with sexual reward, meaning sex.
Right.
Yeah. So really interesting stuff. And does it, Dr. Brandon, in your professional judgment,
yes,
does this apply to humans too?
Well, I think that we really have to entertain that possibility very strongly, that this absolutely applies to humans, in particular adolescents. So what we know is that all of our brains are what they call neuroplastic, meaning our brain neurobiology can change with experience. Is that a fair way to
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Now, ours can do that, but an adolescence does that at like warp speed. Like an adolescent's brain is intended to modify itself for the environment at a much greater rate than our adult brains are. So when an adolescent, that 12-year-old, that 13-year-old with a brain that's ready to rewire, is exposed to porn and then repeatedly exposed to porn, and they orgasm, they have their opioid release,
right?
They have their reinforced experience without ever interacting sexually with a human, we can pretty much guess that for a certain significant, potentially, group of people, of young people, they're going to form their entire sexual love map around what they see in porn, and it's going to be that much more difficult for them to be attracted to a human or have human sex, let's say. Not to be attracted to a human necessarily, but to have sex, literal sex with a human. I mean, talk to me.
In my practice, going back 30 plus years, porn, or let's keep it to porn. I was going to talk about still pictures too, like the old Playboy magazines, but let's keep it to porn because I think it's more of an intense experience. The issue for guys going way back when most of the people, I mean, porn's only been around really in easily available ways to see it since the internet. Right? So we're going back to sometime in the 2000s.
I can't remember. I wish I.
So widely available internet, right? And most of the men then had earlier experiences sexually.
Right.
And the way that porn played out as a problem was that men, especially younger men, had unrealistic ideas of whether they matched up sexually, because all they really ever saw, the only time they ever saw an erect penis on somebody else, if they were straight, was really through porn.
Yeah.
And a lot of the men selected for porn were selected to be there because they had unusually generous proportions, shall we say. Yeah. And so those guys didn't feel like they matched up, even if their penis was perfectly adequate in size, sometimes even generous. So I would have to counsel some of these young men that their penis was great, but average or above average, fine. It made a big deal. The other way was around sexual relations and scripts, and the idea that women and how women interacted with them wasn't going to be like what porn was. Right? That those were literally scripts, right? Where sex happened very quickly. There was no need to get to know anybody. Everybody was willing to jump in the sack at the drop of a hat. Those were the kinds of things. It's different now because the young people, before they're even old enough to do much with an actual young girl or adolescent or young woman, have already been trained, if you will. They've had their heads are filled with these images that come from these artificial situations through porn.
Right.
And it's hard. And what I would imagine is that real sex, as wonderful as it can be, as exciting as it can be, isn't what porn is.
Right. It's more boring a lot of the times than the extreme stuff that is seen on a screen.
Yeah. It's an excellent stimulus, but it may not be a super stimulus.
Right.
Yeah. And the problem then is that if real sex is less exciting, less stimulating, less orgasmic, if you will, then what does that mean about the future of human sex?
Right. I personally, I think that it's going to become less and less, I don't know, what's the word, popular? Done.
Yeah.
I really think that we've been heading in this direction for decades, and I think that I sort of in my mind imagine a time when like a kid is going to say to another kid, "Do you know?" Like they're going to see animals having sex in a zoo or something, and they say, "Do you know humans used to do that?"
Oh, that's funny.
The other one's going to be like, "No, humans would not do that."
Oh, that's funny.
But you know what? That's kind of what it's seriously what I imagine.
You and I have spoken, and I've heard you speak many times about some of what's popular now in porn, right? There's, I think it gets published every year, right? Like Pornhub used to be I don't know if it's still the biggest, but used to be one of the biggest porn sites. And it was every year they would put out what the most popular items were.
Yeah.
And coming up strong over the last some years was alien sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sex.
And
sex with creatures that aren't even human.
Yeah. Right. And that's super popular. And parallel to that, in romance novels now, the popular romance novel for like the under 40 crowd is, they call it romantasy, which is a combination of romance and fantasy, which is the same thing. So rather than porn being like surreal or comic or made up, their characters in the romance novels are made up. They're not, they're superhuman and
I see.
and this kind of
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not human beings having romantic. It's or not human
Right.
beings having sex in a romance novel. It's people with superhuman powers and beings and
Right.
aliens having sex in these romance novels. So it's happening with all these
Yeah.
genres.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking if Wolverine had sex, like would his titanium blades come out, and could that be a problem? Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
sound right.
So, all right. So listen, so let's get serious for a second. So parents, um, their kids are seeing stuff and the parents don't even know they're seeing it.
Right. This is the kids' sex education.
Yeah. The kids are getting exposed to this. This is their sex education. What can and should parents do, you think?
Parents need to be aware that it's very likely that their kids accessing porn before age 12, certainly at age 12. So parents need to talk about this to their kid well before they feel like their kid is ready and before they feel ready to do it. Because if they don't offer some sex education, this is what their child is being educated on.
Right.
So,
Is it beyond? Are we too far into this to actually have kids to prevent them from being able to access porn through the
parents can
internet?
do a lot in their homes in terms of parental controls on computers and all of that, and they absolutely should do whatever they feel comfortable with in doing that. But they cannot assume that because they've done that, their child is now protected.
Right.
They cannot assume that because
Right.
so much of this is accessed during school hours.
Yeah.
Or, when the kid's playing with friends. And the research, I wish I had it in front of me because I don't have it memorized, but the research shows that amongst the kids that weren't actively looking for porn, they're still like it's falling kind of into their lap,
Can't avoid it.
like weekly even.
Yeah. Can't avoid
It
it.
just keeps coming to them, even if they're not looking for it. You
Right.
can't avoid it. So even if your child really isn't interested in this, there's a good likelihood they're seeing it anyway. So they really need to be prepared and told that what they see, this isn't what human people tend to want to do in the bedroom. It's more of a sex theater fantasy. Have you ever seen it? What was your experience of it? Have you heard about it? Ask them questions. Don't just tell them, don't watch, engage them.
Right.
Don't be upset and stay calm and say,
Yeah.
Please talk to me when you do see it and we'll
Yeah.
talk it through. It's going to be confusing. You're going to be curious.
Yeah.
But let me know and I'll help you figure it all out. Like, you got to do it as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a tightrope for the parents too, because on the one hand, you would hate for them to be have contribute something negative about sexuality, right? Like to their kids, like they shouldn't have this terribly negative association, right? Because hopefully the child goes on and has marvelous sexual relations in the rest of his life, right?
Right.
And that's part of an important part of his intimate relationships as he becomes an adult, right? At the same time, we want to make sure that the children get an idea that some of this stuff is bizarre and awful, and that don't feel like you need to watch it.
Right.
Right?
It can be scary.
It can be scary.
Yep.
Yeah.
It scares adults. I have adults coming into my practice upset by what they've seen on porn.
Yeah. I think the most important message might be that it's not really sex.
That's good.
Right? That how people have sex is different than this. This is something that really is designed to be both provocative and impactful.
It's designed to keep people watching.
Yeah.
So they're going to put out shock material,
Shock
whatever
material.
they need to keep people watching.
Yeah, shock value. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the authors who doesn't talk about this necessarily, but talks about kids in tech is Jonathan Haidt. I think that's how you say his last name.
Yeah, Haidt.
Yeah. And I would encourage parents to kind of like find him, follow him, because he's really the expert in kids and adolescents and technology. And they'll get guidance through him, even if it's not directly about porn, on how to handle some of this stuff. He's fabulous.
Yeah. Marian, please don't take this the wrong way, but I was just kind of curious whether you were planning to wear a jacket when we go out to dinner tonight.
I wasn't. But what what the female rats did is in this article that cracks me up is when they were showing interest, like they were trying to attract the male, they would run at him, hop over top of him, and then kick him.
Well, that'll get his attention, certainly.
I thought I might, engage some of that.
Oh, yeah.
See if
Yeah.
that works.
I'd go with the jacket, actually. Well, I think it's important stuff. We make light of it, but this is an important topic, especially for parents with young kids.
Right.
And geez, I'm so glad that I'm not of that younger generation right now growing up with all this stuff. Sex and sexuality in relationships was confusing enough.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, was the most confusing thing. The most confusing thing as an adolescent. And I can't even imagine what it's like today.
No. I know.
Yeah. So my heart goes out to everybody who's coming of age, and somehow we'll get through this together. Well, thus ends another episode of the Sex Doctors podcast. I'm Dr. Abe Morgentaler. This is my beautiful wife, Dr. Marianne Brandon, and we are
The Sex Doctors.
Check us out on the sexdoctorspodcast.com on the internet. You can find all your favorite episodes. There's surveys there. We'd love to hear your feedback on some of these things. They're anonymous, and we'll report back on another day about some of the questions and the answers.
Right.
And give us a thumbs up or a like and subscribe.
Yes, please. And we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye-bye.